Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she hurried between the tables of the upscale restaurant, the Golden Oak. Her worn uniform was clean, but the seams were beginning to fray, and her shoes were so thin she could feel every stone on the floor. It was already her third shift this week, and her feet ached, but she had no choice. At 23 years old, Sarah had been working as a waitress for 5 years to support her sick mother and put her younger sister through college. Every night, she returned to her small, run-down apartment, counted the few dollars in tips, and hoped it would be enough for rent and her mother's medications. The Golden Oak wasn't where she normally worked. She was only here as temporary help because one of the regular waitresses had fallen ill. The guests here wore suits that cost more than her annual salary and talked about business deals she could only dream of. On this particular Thursday evening, the restaurant was busier than usual. Businessmen in expensive suits sat at tables covered with white tablecloths, drinking wine that cost hundreds of dollars per bottle and having conversations about million-dollar deals. Sarah moved between them like a shadow, taking orders and serving food while trying to remain invisible. She knew she didn't belong here, but she desperately needed the money. Her mother's medical bills were piling up, and the rent was already overdue. This one night at the Golden Oak could mean the difference between having a roof over their heads or facing homelessness. The restaurant's atmosphere was intimidating. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and the soft murmur of wealthy conversations. Sarah tried to focus on her work, knowing that one good night of tips could help her family survive another week. Around 9 p.m., a man entered the restaurant who immediately drew everyone's attention. He was tall, wearing an impeccable black suit and a watch that sparkled under the crystal chandeliers. His grey hair was perfectly styled, and he moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to having all doors opened for him. The restaurant manager personally rushed to greet him and led him to the best table in the restaurant, a quiet spot by the window overlooking the city lights. Sarah immediately recognized that this was no ordinary guest. The way the staff bustled around him, the respectful glances from other patrons, everything indicated he was someone important. "Sarah," the manager called her over, "you'll be serving table 12 tonight. That's Mr. Harrison. Treat him with the utmost respect and fulfill his every wish." Sarah nodded nervously and approached the table. The man looked up, and she noticed his piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. Despite his imposing presence, he smiled kindly. "Good evening," she said with a trembling voice. "My name is Sarah, and I'll be serving you tonight. Can I bring you something to drink?" Mr. Harrison ordered an expensive whiskey and watched her carefully as she took the order. Sarah felt his gaze and became nervous. She wasn't used to guests observing her so intensely. When she brought the whiskey, Mr. Harrison noticed her trembling hands. "Are you nervous?" he asked with a deep, soothing voice. Sarah blushed and shook her head, but he smiled knowingly. "Don't worry, you're doing great." There was something different about this man. Unlike other wealthy customers who barely acknowledged the staff, he seemed genuinely interested in her as a person. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would be unlike any other. Block 3. The observation. 300 words. Over the next hour, Mr. Harrison discreetly observed Sarah as she hurried between tables. He saw how she served every guest with a genuine smile, despite being obviously tired. He noticed how she patiently helped an elderly gentleman find his glasses that had fallen under the table, and how she gave recommendations to a nervous young couple for the perfect menu. What impressed Mr. Harrison most was Sarah's authenticity. In a world full of superficiality and calculation, she seemed real and innocent. When a drunk businessman became offensive and insulted her, she responded with dignity and professionalism instead of fighting back. "Excuse me for the disturbance," she said politely to the drunk man. "Can I perhaps bring you some coffee?" Her voice trembled slightly, but she maintained her composure. Mr. Harrison also observed how Sarah secretly packed leftovers from table 8, probably for later, he thought. He saw the worn edges of her uniform, the cheap shoes, and the way she carefully counted her tips and put them in a small tin. When she reached his table to replace his empty whiskey glass, he spoke to her. "You work hard," he remarked. "How long have you been here?" "Only tonight, sir," Sarah replied. "I normally work at a different restaurant, but they needed help." "And what do you do when you're not working?" he continued. Sarah hesitated, then answered honestly, "I'm actually always working, sir. I have 3 jobs to support my family." Mr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully and made a mental note. He had met many people in his life, but there was something special about this young woman. Her honesty, her work ethic, her genuine care for others. These were rare qualities in his world. Block 4. The conversation deepens. 300 words. Around 10:30 p.m., the restaurant had become quieter. Many guests had already left, and Sarah had more time to focus on Mr. Harrison. He still hadn't ordered food, only drinks while observing her. "Sit with me for a moment," he suddenly said, pointing to the chair across from him. Sarah looked around nervously. "Don't worry, I've already spoken with your manager. A few minutes will be fine." Hesitantly, Sarah sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "Tell me about your family," Mr. Harrison said gently. Sarah hesitated at first, but something in his tone calmed her. "My mother is sick," she began. "She has cancer, and the treatments are very expensive. My younger sister is studying at college, and I'm trying to pay her tuition so she can have a better future than I can." "And your father?" Mr. Harrison asked. "He left us when I was 16, Sarah answered with a voice that betrayed pain. "Since then, I've been responsible for my family." Mr. Harrison listened attentively, occasionally asking a question and showing genuine interest in her story. Sarah told him about her dreams, how she once wanted to be a teacher but could never afford college. She spoke about the nights when she couldn't sleep because she worried about the bills. "You're a remarkable young woman," Mr. Harrison finally said. "Stronger than you probably think." Sarah blushed. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "And that's what makes you remarkable," he replied with an enigmatic smile. As their conversation continued, Sarah found herself opening up more than she had to anyone in years. There was something about this man that made her feel safe, understood. She had no idea that this conversation would change her life forever. Block 5. The shocking offer. 300 words. At 11 p.m., the restaurant was almost empty. Only a few guests remained at their tables, and the staff was beginning to clean up for the evening. Sarah was preparing to bring Mr. Harrison his check when he stopped her with a hand gesture. "Sarah," he said, his voice suddenly very serious, "I want to make you an offer." Sarah looked at him confused. "An offer, sir?" Mr. Harrison reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a check. He placed it on the table so Sarah could see the amount. Her eyes widened in disbelief. $1 million. "I'm offering you $1 million, he said calmly, "for one night with me." The words hit Sarah like a blow. She stared at the check, then at Mr. Harrison, then back at the check. $1 million. More money than she could ever imagine. Enough to treat her mother, put her sister through college, and still have enough left over for a new life. The other guests in the restaurant had noticed the conversation. Waiters and service staff paused and glanced discreetly toward their table. The atmosphere suddenly became tense, as if everyone was holding their breath. $1 million, Mr. Harrison repeated. "All you have to do is spend the night with me. No one will ever know. You could wake up tomorrow morning as a rich woman." Sarah stared at the check, her thoughts racing. She thought about her mother lying in that cold hospital room, about her sister working 3 jobs to finance her studies, about all the sleepless nights filled with worry. Think about it, Mr. Harrison added, what you could do with this money. The weight of the moment pressed down on Sarah's shoulders. $1 million. The solution to all her problems, right there in front of her. Block 6. The inner struggle. 300 words. Sarah stared at the check, her hands trembling. $1 million lay right in front of her, the solution to all her problems. She imagined being able to provide her mother with the best treatment, allowing her sister to finish college without worrying. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Sarah, my dear, never forget who you are. Money is important, but your dignity is priceless. She thought about all the years her mother had taught her to be honest and respectful, about all the sacrifices her mother had made to raise her to be a good person. Would she throw all of that away for money? Mr. Harrison watched her carefully. You're thinking about your family, he said. That's understandable. But also think about this. With this money, you could give them a new life. Your mother could get the best treatment. Your sister could finish her studies without worry. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In her head, 2 voices fought each other. One told her this was her only chance to help her family. The other reminded her of the values she had grown up with. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Mr. Harrison. At that moment, the entire restaurant staff was looking toward them. Even the remaining guests had noticed that something important was happening. Mr. Harrison, she began with a voice that sounded stronger than she felt. She paused, her heart beating so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Everyone seemed to be waiting for her answer. The check lay on the table between them, representing everything she had ever wanted, but never thought she could have. The moment stretched on, heavy with anticipation and consequence. Block 7. The surprising answer. 300 words. Sarah slowly stood up, her legs trembling, but her voice was firm. Mr. Harrison, she said, looking directly into his eyes, I appreciate your offer, but I must decline. A collective gasp went through the restaurant. The waiters exchanged incredulous looks. Someone dropped a glass that shattered on the floor. Mr. Harrison leaned back, his eyes showing surprise, but also something else. Respect. $1 million, Sarah. Are you sure you've thought this through? Yes, sir, Sarah replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. My mother taught me that some things aren't for sale. My dignity, my self-respect, my integrity. These are things that no amount of money in the world is worth. She gently pushed the check back toward him. I may be poor, Mr. Harrison, but I'm not desperate enough to sell myself. I'll find a way to help my family, but not like this. The entire restaurant was in complete silence. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working and were listening to the conversation. You're refusing $1 million? Mr. Harrison asked again, as if he couldn't believe it. Yes, Sarah said firmly. I'm declining your offer. Mr. Harrison studied her for a long, intense moment. Then something unexpected happened. He began to smile, not the calculating smile of a rich man, accustomed to getting what he wanted, but a genuine, warm smile full of admiration. You know what, Sarah? He said quietly. That was exactly the answer I was hoping for. The confusion on Sarah's face was evident. Around them, the restaurant remained silent, everyone trying to understand what had just happened. The tension was palpable, but there was something in Mr. Harrison's expression that suggested this story was far from over. Block 8. The Revelation. 300 words. Mr. Harrison stood up and slowly clapped his hands. Ladies and gentlemen, he said in a raised voice so everyone in the restaurant could hear him, I want to introduce you all to someone, Sarah Martinez, a young woman with more integrity than most people I've met in my lifetime. Sarah looked at him confused. "I don't understand." "Let me properly introduce myself," Mr. Harrison said. "My name is James Harrison, and I'm the founder of the Harrison Foundation, a charitable organization that helps people in need. But not just any people, people with character, people who show they deserve help." Sarah's mouth opened in surprise. "That was a test?" "In a way, yes," Mr. Harrison replied. "I visit restaurants like this to find people like you, people who, despite their difficult circumstances, don't give up their values. People who show they deserve help, not because they're desperate, but because they've earned it." He reached into his pocket again and pulled out another check. "Sarah, I still want to give you $1 million, but this time as a gift, with no conditions, to help your mother, enable your sister to finish her studies, and give you the chance to pursue your dreams." The restaurant exploded in applause. The guests stood up and clapped, the waiters cried with emotion, and even the stern manager smiled. Sarah stared at the new check, tears streaming down her face. "But why?" "Because you showed that money can't corrupt you," Mr. Harrison answered, "and that is priceless." The other patrons began approaching their table, offering congratulations and expressing their amazement at what they had witnessed. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the kindness and support from complete strangers. Block 9. The emotional reaction, 300 words. Sarah broke down in tears, her knees gave out, and she sank back into the chair. The relief, the joy, the sheer disbelief, everything overwhelmed her at once. "I can't accept this," she stammered between tears. "This is too much." "You can and you will," Mr. Harrison said gently. "But that's not all." He sat down across from her again. "The Harrison Foundation also wants to offer you a full scholarship to college. You mentioned wanting to be a teacher. It's never too late to start." Sarah couldn't speak anymore. She covered her face with her hands and wept. But these were tears of joy, relief, and gratitude. An elderly waitress approached the table and placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Honey," she said with a voice choked with tears, "you did the right thing. Your mother can be proud of you." The restaurant manager also came over. "Sarah," he said, "after what I've seen tonight, you'll always have a job here if you want it, although I think you're destined for greater things." Mr. Harrison smiled. "I've never met anyone who refused $1 million to preserve their integrity. In my world, where everything seems to be for sale, you've shown me that there are still people who are priceless." Sarah looked up and saw the faces of all the people around her, all smiling at her, all moved by her story. "I still can't believe it," she whispered. "Believe it," Mr. Harrison said. "Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter. Tonight you didn't just pass a test, you reminded all of us what true character looks like." The warmth and support from everyone in the restaurant made Sarah realize that sometimes the greatest wealth comes from staying true to yourself. Block 10. The life-changing turn, 300 words. In the following weeks, Sarah's life changed completely. The check was cashed, and for the first time in her life, she didn't have to worry about money. Her mother received the best cancer treatment available, and the doctors were optimistic about her recovery. Her sister could finally focus on her studies without working 3 jobs. She called Sarah every day to thank her and tell her how proud she was of her. Sarah herself enrolled in the education program. On the first day of university, she thought back to that night in the restaurant. If she had accepted the offer, she wouldn't be here today. She would have been rich, but could she have lived with herself? Mr. Harrison became a mentor to her. He told her that he had been testing people for years, but had never met anyone who had refused such a large sum. "Most people have a price," he said. "You proved that you don't." The story spread through social media. Reporters wanted to interview Sarah, but she declined most requests. She didn't want the spotlight. She just wanted to live a normal life and help others the way she had been helped. On her graduation day as a teacher, Mr. Harrison sat in the audience. After the ceremony, he came to her. "I have a proposal," he said. "How about joining the Harrison Foundation? We need someone like you to help find others who deserve help." Sarah smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." Her mother, now fully recovered, worked as a volunteer at a hospital. Her sister had become a doctor and also helped people in need. The entire family had become an example of how life can turn around when you don't give up your principles. Block 11. The inspiration for others. 300 words. 5 years later, Sarah worked as a full-time coordinator for the Harrison Foundation. She traveled across the country to find people in need, but not just any people. People with character, people who showed they deserved help. She developed a unique program called the Integrity Test, inspired by her own experience. The foundation would test people in difficult situations to see if they would give up their principles for money. On a rainy Thursday evening, Sarah visited a small cafe in a working-class neighborhood. She observed a young man who, despite his obvious financial difficulties, gave his own sandwich to a homeless man. It reminded her of herself years ago. "Excuse me," she said, approaching him. "Can I make you an offer?" Her mother was now completely recovered and worked as a volunteer at a hospital. Her sister had become a doctor and also helped people in need. The entire family had become an example of how life can turn around when you don't abandon your principles. Mr. Harrison, now over 70, regarded Sarah like a daughter. "You know," he said to her one day, "when I made you that offer back then, I hoped you would refuse. But I wasn't sure. You didn't just exceed my expectations, you changed my life." Sarah smiled. "You changed mine too. You showed me that there are people who want to see and reward the good in others." "And now you're doing the same for others," he replied. "The circle is complete." That evening, as Sarah drove home, she thought back to the moment when she had refused the $1 million. It had been the best decision of her life. Now she had the power to change other lives, to show others that integrity and character are worth more than any amount of money.